an amazing session. I'm so excited to have all of you here with us, and also to have our two special guests, Thao from Kilomet 109 and Daniel from Some Gai Gin. So the session is on cultural heritage, sustainable agriculture, and indigenous communities in the supply chain. So Vietnam has 53 ethnic minority groups, and they form an integral part of the country's agricultural supply chain using traditional farming techniques that are adapted to their distinct geographies, climates, and cultures. So in this session, we'll hear from Vietnam's first artisanal gin maker, Some Gai Distillery, and Kilomet 109, Hanoi's internationally renowned sustainable fashion house, and how they work hand in hand with indigenous farming communities to grow raw materials using culturally distinct and sustainable methods. And these materials are then used to make modern products, so not handicrafts, but modern products for domestic consumption and export that reflect Vietnam's cultural heritage, both in design and composition. So first, I'd like to invite Daniel and Thao to the stage, please. Thank you. Thank you, you guys. So first, they both came all the way down from Hanoi. And they always say yes. Every time I ask them to come and speak at this event, they always say yes. So I'm very thankful for that. And I always look forward to the opportunity to always share a stage and ask Daniel and Thao more about their ethos and their process and why they do what they do. So first, I'll start with Thao. If you want to give an introduction to Kilomet 109, and then I think we have a short video or a slide of your process, and then we'll move on to Daniel. So,
thank you, Mimi. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As Mimi already introduced about us, so Kilomet 109 stands for contemporary fashion, applying traditional methods and many fast disappearing tradition of making textile in Vietnam. We work with side by side with diverse array of local communities and indigenous communities across Vietnam to grow our own fibers, own natural dyes, and weave, and hand stitch by ourselves, into very contemporary fashion-forward pieces. Yes, that's it about us. Over the years, we trying to expand the network of the communities in Vietnam. So right now we work with 7 communities. Hopefully in the future we're going to increase that number, as much as we can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Daniel, a bit about Some Gai?
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Mimi. Thanks, Thao. So I'm Daniel. I'm the founder with Some Gai Distillery. So Some Gai Distillery, with our farmer partners, we grow and harvest indigenous and heirloom grains native to Vietnam, and we use them to make alcohol, specifically premium spirits and wine. And then we also market, sell, brand, and we distribute, market, and brand these products in local and global export markets. Our company is based on, we have a 4-pillar approach to sustainability that's pretty core to our company. Some of them are like skills development, environmental ethics. Specifically here, we focus on nature-led solutions, specifically around native, heirloom species, economic transparency. I can go into the model of how we invest in farmers later, and also cultural preservation. And so my background is in agriculture and ethnobotany, so supply chain is actually quite integral to the DNA of our company. We work directly with farmers in 4 different regions, mostly with ethnic minority farmers in Lao Cai, Yên Bai, Điện Biên, and Kon Tum in the Tây Nguyên province. And let me see here. And that's a little bit about our company. Thank you.
Thank you. So first I want to start out with a question for both of you is why did you both choose to integrate sourcing from indigenous communities into your products? Because it's not something, when you think about sourcing from Vietnam, especially for fashion or F&B, sourcing from indigenous communities is not the first low-hanging fruit step. It's a very high-hanging fruit. What's your starting point? Do you start with the product and then look for materials and think, oh, I happened upon this type of silk that happens to come from this ethnic minority community, or Daniel, like, I like this botanical, it tastes really good in my gin, but I got to source it from the red Zao? Or do you start with the desire to work with the communities first and then create the products around it?
So I think for me, it's so my background is in agriculture and ethnobotany. So my work before doing some Cai Distillery was actually working in forest land allocation and forest management in Vietnam. And so actually across our work before that, what was very distinct and profound to me was that actually mostly indigenous farmers in these areas we found to be the main stewards of not only the environment, but then also the heirloom seeds that are being passed on from generation to generation, which is very crucial to the maintenance of biodiversity in Vietnam. And so for me, the impetus behind Sông Cai Distillery was to find an economic model in which we can add value to these agricultural products. We tried, before landing on alcohol, we actually tried spice trade, we tried other products, but alcohol is actually one of the main ways that we're able to not only tremendously add value for the farmers, but then also engage consumers in a very meaningful way. In addition, because we're able to do that, we chose, the reason why we not only chose to work with indigenous farmers, but then also with native and heirloom species, is because we feel that, and this is actually in the UN and also in the EU, they talk about a concept called farmers' privilege, is recognizing that farmers have been the unpaid stewards of all of this agricultural knowledge and technology through generations. And then so we felt that the premium that we were paying the farmers, even now with the latest iteration of our products, which is actually shared intellectual property with farmers, is actually a fair pay for generations of knowledge that's often kind of airlifted, but out of context. And I think it's really important for us as the ethos of our company.
But these models that you're talking about, like the shared value, the shared pay with the communities, is that something that was already established and you're like, oh, this is a really great model? Or is it something that you kind of developed along the way, just as you were developing your relationship with the communities?
We fine-tuned it as we went. So we have a 3-step process in which we work with farming communities. So the first step is we source. Sourcing allows us to have an economic motive, and we just heard from Kilomet how important it is to ensure the benefits of the farmers and the communities. That's actually core in how we approach communities and develop a working relationship. Once we have a repertoire, the company will invest or give a low interest or no interest loan to farming communities to build up infrastructure. One of the main challenges is, say, for example, in Vietnam, earlier we heard about moving up the supply chain. Most farmers, especially in the highland areas above 1,600 meters, have no access to processing facilities. So we end up running, we just this past year had to run plumbing, water, electricity to even build processing facilities with the hopes of one day outsourcing a portion of our processing to different areas. So that's the second stage in which we work with farmers. We have done that in 3 different localities. And the third and final stage, which is our newest, is this is actually a pilot project. It's actually on its 3rd shipment to the US, is with communities which we have a longer working relationship. In this particular community is 8 years. Before the iteration of the company even, we actually will collaborate and build a product together based on something that they've done historically. So in this case, it's medicinal liqueur. It's Amaro in Italian, but in the US right now it's quite hot as a trend. And we share the intellectual property. This intellectual property has already been, I forget what you call it, but it's been designated and recognized by the United States government in terms of shared intellectual property between us and 50-50 between us and the Red Zao community. So that's one of the ways we also want to take a 3rd stage, is to make sure that the farmers have actual equity in the long term for the knowledge that they've passed down and are contributing actively to the modernization of their products.
So it's something that you've built in from the start. So it's not something like, oh, I'm working with farmers, I noticed this, I'll build it in. This is from the ethos from the start as you started this company.
Yeah, and it takes a long time because equity doesn't mean anything to people if they don't have income to send their kids to school in the immediate.
Yeah. And so Thao, what about you? Because your product, your clothes are incredible. I don't know if any of you have ever been to Thao's store in Hanoi, but her clothing is phenomenal. It's like something you would see on like the runways in Paris. And for you, did you start off with, wanting to design and produce these really beautiful pieces of clothing and then look for the materials and then the communities? Or did you start off saying, I want to design something or have a product where I work with the communities first?
I was born and raised in a small town of Thái Bình, Đông Hưng, and northern Vietnam. And surround our town is many local craft communities. So, I breathe in that kind of environment and continue to carry it in my professional path later on. So I always fascinated by the local craft communities and travel around the country to visit them and to learn to study about them as well. But until 2009, when I start incorporating many traditional methods into fashion lines and realize that many traditions and many craft communities on the edge of despairing. And why not doing something that married the traditional method into contemporary design, and by doing that is make the product is more relevant to our contemporary fashion needs, and at the same time it support the community to preserve their traditions. So yeah, that's my journey. It's not coming from very well-planned thing. It's really generally it's very organic way.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, in working with Indigenous communities, I have worked with especially the Hmong and the Red Dao for a long time. It's not easy. It is not easy to work with Indigenous communities. There are language barriers. There's geographical barriers, cultural barriers, and for me, it's just working on the NGO side, but for you guys, it's also integrating them into your business operations and your business plans, which means there's specific delivery times and plans and things like that. So what are some of the unique challenges for Indigenous communities for you in integrating them into your wider supply chain, right? Because again, you have to rely on certain deliveries, certain methods in order for you to produce your product. And then use that to also help yourselves in Vietnam move up the value chain. And then part two of the question is, if there are challenges or whatever the challenges are, is there a way or what are the opportunities for private sector investment or DFIs, as we saw here, to help alleviate these challenges? Are there examples from other sectors that you've seen or worked in, like coffee, where there are more established relationships with Indigenous farming suppliers?
As I mentioned, we work from really ground up, from seeds to harvesting to weave our own textile and to the final design. So it's a very hyper, hand attached to the product.
Which is not easy.
Yes, it's not easy. It's a time and labor consuming. It takes us much longer to be able to finish a garment compared with the normal standard fashion circle. So it's not easy. It's a real challenge because we running a fashion business. It's not charity. So we need, we always have to compete with time. And of course, the labels, it costs us a lot more because the timeline is much longer. So to overcome, to minimize the issues, myself, I always try to arrange my time to spend as much time as possible with these communities. And by doing that, the commitment and the trust, the creative trust, is much more well built. And the productivity and quality also increase because of that. So yeah, it's. I think it's a willingness of spend time being with them, solve the problems. You know, prepare themselves for anything could happen on the road.
Like what happens? What are some experiences that you've had in the past?
Too many to mention, but one of my first experience working with the Nguyen community in Cao Bang was with indigo dyeing. And I was so confident when I first visit them that I know about the dye, I know about different type of indigo dyeing process. But when I show up there and want to experiment with to create the new shades, so like sky blue and different shade of blue, which is a very new thing for the community because this group of women, they masterful in the indigo dyeing and create beautiful deep midnight blue indigo. But they never done the lighter shade or darker shade or mixed with the other dyes. So it took us a while to do. And when the first sample finished, I was so happy to see beautiful light blue on the cotton voile. But the women, they look at each other and they say, it's at the end of the day, they told me that for them it looks ugly. And I came back to Hanoi, placed an order, and after 3 months, the 200 meters of cotton fabric arrived in Hanoi, and it was disaster because they're uneven. They never work with the bigger width of cloth, and also different type of methods doing indigo dyeing. So it's one of many experience that we've been through together.
And it's not like you can just reorder a new bolt of dyed fabric because it took 3 months to grow and...
Yeah, 3 months, that is quite fast because we finished the weaving already. So only the dyeing. Yeah, and the fabric sent by Nai Bas. So it's, in Vietnam, we're lucky for that. We can easy to make things work in the different part of, province and using on the public transportation. But it still took me another 8 months to finally launch the collection. Is called Seeds, done by this group of women in Cao Bang. So it's the time consuming and a lot of mistakes.
Daniel, what about you? Any unique challenges to working with the Hmong or Red Zao or?
Yeah, I think I echo everything that Chí Thao says, because when you're saying the whole 3 months and you receive it, it's a disaster. Definitely been there. But I think for us specifically, so I used to also work in agriculture supply chains in the US, and I think one of the unique challenges in Vietnam in general, not even just with the indigenous communities, there's a lack of infrastructure. Here is not just like what I'm talking about was roads or hard infrastructure like I mentioned before, but even financial institutions that can support farmers and also other, people in the supply chain for agriculture. So for example, one of the key examples is last year, one of our grain farmers was struck by natural disaster and couldn't deliver fully on the contract. We're not going to go knock on his door and demand his repayment back of, the contract. Essentially, what ends up being the onus on the small, medium enterprises or any kind of business that's working with farmers is we are not only the bank, but then we're also the farm service agency. So in the US, when we're working with small farmers, the farm service agency will actually step in to ensure crop damages. Whereas here, we pay pretty much 100% of the contract upfront for grains. And we also take the brunt when it comes to environmental damages. And this is really tough because I think similar to Chí Thao, our products are, for example, we have whiskey. It takes us 9 months to grow the corn or the grain, distilling it. We age 5 more years. That's 6 years before we actually even realize any sort of revenue stream. This product alone, for example, takes 18 months before it gets, before it's ready to bottle from fermentation after growing a whole season of grain. So I think these are very unique challenges when it comes to working with farmers is we need to ensure their livelihoods first. So a lot of our contracts are 100% payment upfront, so that the farmers really know that, hey, we're not going to run on them, because many buyers have done so in the past. The second challenge I would say in terms of infrastructure is also land ownership. I think we've talked a lot about carbon credits, but actually a lot of the places that we're working in, Thao and I, in terms of highlands, land ownership is actually not clear. If you do not have a clear red deed, you can't get carbon credits, but it's also really hard to plan long term. So a lot of our projects, say for example this product, entirely uses forestry products, understory crops that require an overstory to grow, which was intentional to maintain the integrity of the farm or the forest. However, as we're expanding the reach of the forest or reforesting other areas, those are 10, 15-year commitments on land where the ownership may not be clear, for example. And eminent domain is something that's enacted quite often in this country, especially in the highland areas. And so these are some of the unique challenges, I think, working in these more, they actually call them frontier zones. Yeah. And I think for us, it's an external cost that we have to internalize. I think we're fortunate, I think, choosing the premium alcohol category, we build it into our margin. but I'm laughing, but this is also one of the reasons why we chose the product we did, was because unlike grains or spice trade, where we were negotiating price on the, pennies on a bushel, our story is very much at the forefront, and we build it into our margin, and it's been recognized by international press, thankfully.
So with the challenges that you guys have mentioned, is there any room for investors, private investment or FDI investment, to help alleviate these challenges? Like for you, both of you, for crop damage or for whatever reason, delivery is not on time, anything that befalls a vulnerable supply chain community, like ethnic minorities. Is there room for investors to help kind of bear that brunt or alleviate things or try and make things better? Is that possible?
I think definitely. I think there's on the top of my mind. There's probably three main things, and the first thing is really around like some sort of a trade finance vehicle to emulate, say, a farm service agency equivalent in Vietnam, because it helps alleviate a lot of risks that farmers are going through on a season-to-season basis. This phenomena of farmers chasing the market is because there is no farm service agency to help secure some sort of a bottom line for farmers, and especially in the forestry areas. I mean, I work in the Simacai region where there was REDD+. People were getting carbon credits, but they chopped down the forest because it's not worth the trouble to even pick up the check. These kinds of things to alleviate where does my next paycheck come from is really important. The second thing is the cooperative model in Vietnam has, in large part, I don't say like failed 100%, but in large part has failed in the provinces I've seen, but it has the right intentions, because the idea here is if you want farmers to move up in the supply chain, cooperatives, there are two types of major agricultural cooperatives. There's marketing cooperatives, so you build a collective brand together with multiple farmers, or it's a capital cooperative, like a production cooperative, to alleviate startup or operating capital for farmers. Specifically here for Vietnamese farmers, it's processing facilities, and specifically for agricultural products, it's not only processing facilities that have ISO certification, but more importantly is FDA certification. To export to markets like the North American market, you have to have FDA certification. Right now, as part of because we have an FDA...
Can you slow down a little bit for the interpreter?
Oh, sorry. As part of some of the things that we do, we are also expanding our non-alcoholic product line to include honey and other agricultural products so that farmers can leverage our distillery's FDA license, for example. But if we can even start to certify some of the local processing facilities or build them up to a standard, the idea here is not to have farmers then become indentured to just one buyer like us, but to diversify their portfolio. And that's what we encourage. So I think that's the second. And the third and final one, sorry, I'll try and keep this short, is like a national brand. I think one of the things that we are lacking in Vietnam, and speaking as someone who, when you're trying to convince someone in the US to pay $100 for Vietnamese brandy, as opposed to like a Japanese whiskey, there is a huge image component, because Vietnam has for a long time been a high volume, low quality producer. one of the things that FDI, what we can really learn from places like the EU, AOP, DOC, all these really things.
Appellations, yeah.
Yeah, basically the idea that champagne is champagne because the French government invested a lot of money to make sure you know that champagne is way better than Prosecco. That's really important because it's actually helping the farmers. And I think that's something that the Vietnamese government here, we have not done a good job of. Phu Quoc fish sauce is a GI product that's not protected. All the Phu Quoc fish sauce that we eat in America is actually made in Thailand. And this is even just like capacity support for the Bộ Khoa học Công nghệ. I don't remember the English word for that one. Something technology, the Ministry of Technology and something. But sorry. But even having that capacity support to learn how to actually enforce and build strategically GI designated products will help farmers on a much more mass scale than investing in just individual products. Yeah.
But it's sort of like what one of the Anh Huns said today in the earlier session on workforce development for his company. If he registers as a minority-owned, Asian-owned company, the valuation goes down. If he makes it known that the companies that he invests in hire primarily people with disabilities, the value goes down. So there's a problem with perception, and it's hard. It's going to take a long time because there's still this idea that Asia's fast fashion, Asia's cheap, Asia is low quality materials. The better stuff is coming from Europe, or if it's Asia, then it's Japan, right? So yeah.
Oh, sorry. Can I counter that actually?
Oh, I don't believe it, but that's I don't believe that at all. But that's the perception that at least from what Anh Huyen said this morning, with that perception about being from Asia, Asian minority owned, or whatever the criteria is, quote unquote, lesser than, right? And then from fashion standpoint, this is a fast fashion country. Our manufacturing model is built right now on cranking out product as quickly as possible. And yes, we have lots of discussions that talk about how can we move up the value chain, make higher quality products, but that is still some time off because we have to make the investment. So right now, everything is still being driven by quick, fast manufacturing. So for you, Thao, when you are talking to, what's your business model? I'm always curious, do you guys make money doing this? How are you? Because it's so labor intensive. It is, I feel for you, very physically intensive because you guys have to go to the outer regions and the lack of infrastructure makes it difficult. Production delays, all of that. Is this a business that you can also, do good and make money in? You have to make money to be sustainable, right? And then what do your investors say when you're like, I want to give half the IP rights to the Red Zao, or sorry, I can't deliver this collection until another 8 months. So how from a financial standpoint, how do you make this feasible?
It's one of our biggest challenges. It's scalability. How we can be scalable when everything is handmade, hand grow, hand dye, everything. For sustainable fashion itself is already real challenge, especially for the model like ours. We want to prioritize the integrity, the ethos of the brand over the empty marketing slogans. So we want to produce something it's real. And we be able to follow every step of going to produce a garment, so we can be able to transparent 100%. And by doing that, we increase the value of the products, and people willing to pay more. Because we so used to with buying fashion without knowing the story behind the products. You just, very often we make the purchase, seeing the garment, it's trendy, but not really about the people behind who make the garment and where it make, how it make, what's in there. So, our products, to be able to to promote, we need to be able to tell the story of the products. And our products very much attached to the place, to very specific group of people, and each of them is very distinctive, very different, and very vibrant as well. So we need to educate our customer well, and by doing that, it's it helps us to increase the sale, and at the same time that clients can learn about our products inside out. And I think that is the only way we can be able to do from our side. But we do, need some supports either from investors or organization, institutions. For us, like from training to finance support to be able to reach out more communities in Vietnam, because Vietnam is a home for more than hundreds, including ethnic minority groups. And many of them out there, we haven't get there yet. So we really want to be able to have support for that, and also the distribution network is a real limitation for my brand. We only have one flagship store in Hanoi at the moment, and to be able to increase the sale, we do events quite regularly in Vietnam, and within Vietnam also international, and we collaborate with artists and educators, lecturers, university all over the world to provide some very unique educational programs, workshop, talks, exhibitions, and research. And by doing that also help to spread the word for the brand. And also, to get our name, out there, and it's really helped the, for us, for the business side as well.
It's crazy because when you say that everything that you have to do in terms of marketing, it's really educating. It's like you're educating the world on and different populations on sustainable fashion, but that you have to do that as part of your marketing, right? So it's a different budget line, but it's also like a marketing budget line, which is really interesting. What about you, Daniel? Because we've talked about this before in terms of your original investors who are like, why do you want to give half the piping rights to the Red Sao? Don't you want to make money? Like, how do you balance that? The need to be as true as you can to how you want to work with the ethnic minority communities and making money, right? Exporting more countries, everything, being able to develop more product.
I think for like the value proposition for investors when we're sharing intellectual property is the value or the rate in which you can assign value to like an intangible asset such as like intellectual property is almost, I don't want to say infinite, but it's large. And I think I'm lucky that I have pretty supportive people on the board, so I just said, this is what we're gonna do, and
they're like, okay, you're weird, but okay, we'll go with it.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't like I was giving half the company away to the Red Sao. It was specifically, we're doing this on a product by product and brand by brand basis. So it's a little bit different than an ESOP structure which we're structuring. That's a different story. And I think, but still, like, the whole equity sharing of a brand, like a sub-brand, say like this Amaro is that step towards something like that. I think for me, in terms of the proposition for making money is it's a really hard question to answer because we specifically are working in a very niche field. We're specifically working with farmers mostly above 1,600 meters in elevation, which commercial or large-scale intensive agriculture almost does not exist. And because of this, the premium which we're paying for crops is nearly quadruple the market rate. I think this year we are actually paying quadruple for our grains, and we're internalizing all these external costs. And as such, we have to target products that have a higher margin or in a more premium category. If we were going for a commercial play, like a more like a high volume, low value, it's almost impossible because the infrastructure is not there for it. There's no way our farmers can compete with someone in Nguyen or Taiping for commercial grade rice, for example. So I would say like depending on your locality or the farmer or the terroir, more adequately speaking, that you're working with, I think that helps dictate what kind of products are suitable. And we're lucky because something like alcohol can scale because it's not shelf stable and we're able to export to different countries.
I want to shift gears a little bit to the value of the product. So we know now, like, okay, why your clothes cost the amount they do, or why Daniel charges how much for his bottles. You can ask later afterwards how much. But in working with the farmers, what is your process for then integrating the value of these source materials and the difficulty and the hand grown aspect of it and the artisanal aspect of it? How do you integrate that into your actual product? What are the different ways? So we have some samples up here. And then if you guys like maybe each go through the different ways, or what's your process for those people here perhaps who are like, okay, I want to start sourcing something from ethnic minority farmers. How do you then decide, okay, this is going into this, I'm going to use this to make this, and that increases the value of my product by X? Right. Both of you. Because we have some raw materials here. So if you guys want to go through and explain a little bit about the raw materials. And then, the costing of it. Like, how do you view those raw materials, understand how they were cultivated, and then incorporate them into your product, and then say, this product is now X value because of all this? Like, how do you value your own products, knowing what goes into them?
I think we started off... when we first started off Cai Distillery, we knew we had to have a product that was accessible enough to give us enough free cash flow to continue investing or sustain the company to get to these larger projects of whiskey, of aged spirits and wine, or of these shared IP products. And so our first line of products, our first 2 SKUs or product releases, we actually looked to the market and did a survey of premium product categories that we thought would be a good competitor, and we just said, can we make our inputs fit into this? That was the first thing that we did. And then we supplemented with these longer term projects. They say, for example, our whiskey is far above the average price of whiskey. But we were able to do that because I guess I'll step back. The long-term strategy for Cai was, we knew we had a couple challenges. One was inputs. We're not working with commercially available inputs. We have to go build the supply chain. The second was Vietnam does not have a national brand. And secondly, specifically, Vietnam does not have a national brand in premium alcohol. All the buyers that we talked to 5 years ago were like, I've never, ever...
You mean Delat wine doesn't count?
Yeah, Delat wine does not count. Because people have not heard of Delat wine outside of Vietnam. So when we were sitting with our first... Nguyen is here as my partner. We literally were knocking on people, like our buyers' apartments. We were making deliveries in Brooklyn and Williamsburg and all this stuff, and we were begging people because they said, I've never had anything from Vietnam. All I know is like that skunk that you drink in plastic water bottles, when I went backpacking 10 years ago. So stuff like that. So it's really difficult. We knew that we had to first build a brand in order to convince people to buy something that was $100 that's next to Japanese whiskey, for example. That was always like the end game, was to have much higher value products down the line. So we had to go with a more well-priced premium product. So the first thing was, it was a financial play. We needed to make sure that the farmers got paid, but does it make sense also at the price point that we knew strategically we needed to hit in order to build a financial base to grow the company. Once we were able to prove the product market fit in the first 3 years, then we were like, okay, let's put full pedal to the metal for all the other products. The farmers already know, because it first started with a premium of like maybe double the market rate. then we started tripling and quadrupling. The reason why we did this is because as we start to work with farmers, they start to realize, oh, I did not calculate my economics correctly. We now have a full-time accountant, and that accountant also is the accountant for all of our farmers. And we always re-audit every single year, and we're doing an audit right now of internally, are we pricing at every step of the supply chain correctly? I mean, it's kind of weird, right, because we're auditing ourselves, but it's when you ask farmers, like, what do you feel like you should get paid? The first number, you know, it's kind of like us. It's like, oh, I don't know. And then they throw out a number. We go off of market rate, but now we know it's supposed to be quadruple. So they already see that, oh, wow, I was completely undervaluing my value, or my product. The third thing is when we start winning accolades. And so when we have international press coming, or like people from the industry, and they come, we bring them to visit the farmers, and they can actually see the reaction of people who are consuming these products in places like, we just had someone from Italy, we've had, you know, Bloomberg, we've had Wall Street Journal, and when the farmers...
AP in the room.
Saying, oh. And when you see this, and then you see, like, Bloomberg named us one of 16 best spirits in 2021, like, globally. And that changes the mind of farmers that, hey, my makmat, my makan, wow, I didn't know that it could be made into a product of this caliber, or our nipgum, or our corn. And so now it's much less convincing, and now farmers kind of get the MO, and they say, hey, I've got this and this in our, like, historically in our forests. I have X amount that we can harvest sustainably. Can we make something out of it? And so that's what we're doing, and we're expanding the line. Now with this product, for example, the farmers say, hey, I want my own product too. And so it's kind of like what Jeffrey said this morning. You have to go first and go really fast and show that it works, and people will start coming. And
then you build up that relationship of trust over time. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
And, yeah.
Now they know, right? They know that you will always pay,
yeah,
no matter what happens.
Yeah.
You won't abandon them. For Thao, for you, especially with fashion, there's always a danger of, like, ethnic minority kind of fashion or to be handicrafty, right? So in terms of your evaluation of how have you used the way that you work, which is similar to the way that traditional communities always, grow their own indigo, weave their own fabric. How have you been able to then elevate it to a level where, is it just the design, or is it, like, what do you do to put your spin on it so that it moves out of the handicraft category and then eventually, hopefully someday, into like a national brand type of category, so that we're not known as fast fashion anymore?
Yeah, well, to be able to really support the brand like we are, we have to redefine a lot of things, and very much like stereotypes, mindset. So revalue the products, because very often tourists, or even the Vietnamese as well, looking at the product from Vietnam, it's they undervalue it, and why that expensive, and even when they know the whole story behind the product, they still question it's made at here. It shouldn't be that high price. So a lot of things we have to face, and our production process is environmental conscious, because we work with 100% natural fibers, cotton, hemp, and silk. Botanical silk as well, and also the process of making the garment is a very highly conscious, with water, with dye pigments, with waste, and we small batch brand. We make enough as we need. We don't carry a large inventory, so we save some finance from that, and you don't have to face with old stock and sale. We never do sale, so. Customer, they're not expecting, like, at the end of the season that Kilomet 109 gonna put down the price. We never done that. We run some charity, some auction, but like once a year to help the community, and that's it. And what we're doing is trying to stabilize the livelihood by creating the opportunities for local communities and mostly women, about 90% women. We have some men involved production with us, but a very small percentage. And at the same time, we tweak, we change traditional methods and experiment as well. And some materials we create completely new. It's not exist in the community before. And by doing that with the traditional artisans, it helped them to see their own tradition in a new set of eyes. And that is really what we need because the local artisans seeing their tradition with a new value or like add-up value, they're gonna have more motivation to continue, and also having their children to look at their grandma, their mother's textile product in much more valuable, more respect. So we really trying to push these directions and to excite the local artisan to try the new things and applying the traditional method and materials around them. And by doing that, we help them to preserve their tradition in the healthier way and more motivated way, I think. Yeah, I believe.
This is preserving traditions by providing new, evolving the way they are used, right? So innovation, exactly. There's a different type of innovation. I think now we have a couple minutes for questions. Does anybody from the audience have any questions? Yes, Ani.
Hi, I'm Ani from Navy. I wanted to ask if, since you guys are both working with raw materials that are linked to nature, if climate change impacts pricing at that side of things.
Climate change.
Yes, absolutely. Great example was last year. We've, because of, it was there's a couple things. The places in which we work, the precipitation, the month of precipitation has become erratic, and that changes when you can plant. There is no irrigation in the parts that we're farming, and so they need to rely on natural rainfall. And because the seeds that we're working with are not commercially grown seeds, I forgot to mention this, but we also have to fund seed nurseries. We have 3 seed nurseries. We work with Học, which is the National University of Agriculture in Hanoi, to also store some of our seeds because we don't have storage capacity at the right, I guess, temperature. Because if the rain does not come when they need it, the seed becomes inviable. Your whole crop is lost, and you need to reseed right away according to the rain. This is what happened last year. And our corn harvest was basically cut in half. And because farmers used to be able to predict when the rain would come based on the lunar calendar, if that is no longer reliable, we're basically relearning agriculture. It shoots up the cost of agriculture as well. And we're seeing that this year. We're reflecting that in the price of our rice that we're buying. So we've readjusted actually internally. It's not something that is a market-driven force, but this is actually climate-driven. It literally increased 33% for our farmers because we know we have to account for extra seed and extra labor and the risk involved in terms of, we just got a text from our farmer this morning that most of the stuff did not germinate because depending on where you're at in the mountain, it did not get enough precipitation. You need to replant. So these are things that are very real for us. I think in the past 5 years, the amount that we're paying for grain has probably quadrupled because of the increasing erraticism, lack of predictability in precipitation, sunshine, and other environmental factors like that.
What about you, Thao?
In 2018, our Nguyen community faced with drought. We lost the entire 5 fields of indigos. So we planned for about 3 months, and then the drought happened, and I came up to Cao Bang and see my own eye. And the woman said, like, we don't we don't even have enough water to for the water buffalo. So indigo is not prioritized. So we lost the entire crop that year. And not long ago, in Sapa with the black hormone, we're also facing the similar thing with hemp. Farming, because in Sapa, that Danielle is quite high up in the mountain, and the black hormone artisan plant on the hemp on the slope of the high mountain, and they don't. None of our community water their plants. It's totally depend on the weather. Luckily, many of our community they live in the valley, so they don't have a problem with cooking water and all of that. But yes, plant we have that happen, and we also changing the way that we farm as well. Before we độc canh is we plant only one indigo like next year, but we changing and we rotate it. So this year we plant indigo, and the next year we plant another corn or other agriculture plants to support the soil or just to let the soil rest. And in Khao Bang, we have really, luckily, we have access in water resources quite, easily. So it's many underground well. So we use that to water and to also process the textile making. So it's we totally depend on nature, really. Every community, the Thai community in Điện Biên, the same thing. So we prepare for all of that, but it's our process. It really lean on the nature. So we learn how to accept it. And not like trying to change, to move the mountain. So we learn to accept it and also find the alternatives to help us to be able to stabilize the productions. But if it lost, nothing you can do. You just have to accept it and respect the nature.
Okay, and unfortunately, we're out of time. I love hearing Daniel and Thao talk. I could talk to you guys forever. Yeah, so I hope this was an interesting discussion for everyone. I wanted to thank Daniel and Thao, Daniel from Cai Distillery and Thao from Kilomet 109. We have some samples of their product up here, so please come up and take a look, feel the threads and the fabric and the blocks of dye, and then look at the pretty bottles, and there might be some tasting, I don't know, over there. I see some cups over there. But thank you so much for attending this last session and the conference over the last few days. I wanted to thank our title sponsors, Dynam Capital and Vietnam Holding, and our major sponsors, British University Vietnam, our lead government partner, the Australian government, DFAT, and HSBC and New World Hotel, and all of you for coming. And we will see you again next year. Thank you.